The words hit me like a slap across the face right there at our Christmas dinner table. "Stop begging for money," my mother Susan declared loudly, her voice carrying across the dining room, filled with my entire extended family. "It's embarrassing, Jacquelyn. You're 28 years old." My father Robert nodded gravely, adding fuel to the fire. "We've tried to help, but enough is enough." Every single relative around that table bobbed their heads in solemn agreement, their faces showing pity, mixed with disapproval. I sat there, frozen my fork halfway to my mouth, watching as my own parents painted me as some pathetic failure who constantly harassed them for handouts. Then I smiled, pulled out my phone with steady hands, and dialed my bank manager. "Freeze account final 28. The silence that followed my phone call was deafening. Everyone stared at me like I had just spoken in ancient Greek. But let me back up and explain how we got to this moment, because the truth is so much darker than anyone at that table could have imagined. For the past 6 years, I've worked as a senior financial advisor at Meridian Wealth Management in downtown Chicago. I specialize in portfolio management for high net worth clients, and I'm good at what I do, really good. Last year alone, I earned over $200,000 in salary and bonuses. But here's what nobody in my family knows, what my parents, Robert and Susan, have gone to extraordinary lengths to hide from everyone we know. I bought their house. Every single monthly mortgage payment for the past 4 years has come directly from my bank account. When my father had what he claimed was a minor heart episode 3 years ago, I paid the entire hospital bill of $37,000 without question. When my mother needed what she said was emergency dental surgery, I covered the $12,000 cost immediately. When my younger brother Tyler was accepted to Northwestern University, I set up an automatic transfer to pay his full tuition room and board for 4 years straight. My parents told me to keep quiet about all of this financial support. "We don't want to make other family members feel bad," my mother would say whenever I attended family gatherings. "You know how sensitive your Aunt Patricia is about money troubles. It's better if we just keep this between us." So I stayed silent, watching as my parents basked in praise from relatives for being such responsible homeowners and caring parents who somehow managed to support their son through an expensive private university. But 3 weeks ago, everything changed when my cousin Amanda pulled me aside at our family Thanksgiving gathering. She squeezed my arm sympathetically and whispered, "I think it's so wonderful how your parents take care of you, Jacquelyn. I know it must be hard being unemployed for so long, but they really love you." My blood turned to ice water in my veins. I stammered out a response about having a job, but Amanda just gave me that pitying smile and said, "Oh, honey, you don't have to pretend with me. Your mom told all of us about your struggles. She's so worried about you living in their basement and not being able to find steady work. But don't worry, we all think it's beautiful how they support you anyway." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my downtown condo, the one I purchased with cash 2 years earlier, trying to process what I had heard. My parents had been telling our entire extended family that I was unemployed, struggling and living in their basement like some kind of failure who couldn't get her life together. Meanwhile, I was literally funding their entire lifestyle while they collected sympathy and praise for their supposed generosity in supporting their deadbeat daughter. The next morning, I started digging deeper. I called my brother Tyler, who was home from college for Thanksgiving break. When I carefully asked him about college expenses, he grew quiet for a long moment before saying, "I wish you would have helped out at least a little bit, Jacquelyn. I know money's tight for you, but Mom and Dad are really struggling to cover everything on their own. Dad had to take a second job just to pay my tuition." My father's second job was playing poker twice a week with his friends. I knew this because I had seen him leave for these games every Tuesday and Friday evening when I visited. The lie was so elaborate, so complete, that my own brother had been turned against me. That's when I realized my parents weren't just lying about money. They were systematically destroying my relationships with my entire family while profiting from both my financial support and the sympathy they generated by portraying me as a burden. They had created a perfect scam where they got to be the heroes and I got to be the cautionary tale, all while my money funded their comfortable lifestyle. So I started planning my response, and Christmas dinner seemed like the perfect stage for the truth to finally come out. The phone was still pressed to my ear when my bank manager, Gregory, picked up on the second ring. "Jacquelyn, good to hear from you. What can I do for you today?" "I need you to immediately freeze all automatic payments from my accounts ending in 28. I said clearly loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. All mortgage transfers, tuition payments, medical bill coverage, everything. Effective immediately." Gregory paused for just a moment. "Are you sure that's quite a few automatic transfers? The mortgage alone is $4,200 monthly. Plus, the university payments are nearly $6,000 per semester, and there are several medical billing companies on the list." "I'm absolutely certain," I replied, watching my mother's face drain of all color. "Also, please send me a complete statement of all transfers made to Robert and Susan Miller over the past 4 years. I'll need it for my attorney." My father, Robert, started to speak, but I held up my hand while continuing my conversation with Gregory. "One more thing. Please prepare documentation showing the total amount I've paid toward the house at 15 Oak Street in Elmhurst. I believe it's somewhere around $200,000 at this point, correct?" "That sounds about right," Gregory confirmed. "I'll have all those documents prepared by tomorrow morning." I ended the call and slowly placed my phone on the table next to my untouched plate of Christmas ham. The entire dining room had fallen completely silent except for the soft jazz playing from my parents' sound system. My Aunt Patricia was staring at me with her mouth slightly open, her wine glass frozen halfway to her lips. Uncle Gerald had stopped chewing and was looking back and forth between me and my parents like he was watching a tennis match. $200,000, my cousin Amanda whispered. My mother Susan found her voice first, though it came out as more of a croak. "Jacquelyn, what are you doing? This is inappropriate dinner conversation. We have guests." "Oh, we have guests," I repeated slowly, looking around the table at faces I'd known my entire life. "How interesting that you mention guests, because I think our guests deserve to know the truth about where their sympathy donations have been going." Uncle Gerald set down his fork with a loud clatter. "Sympathy donations. What sympathy donations?" I reached into my purse and pulled out a small folder I had prepared. Last month, I hired a private investigator to look into my parents' finances. It turns out that while I've been paying their mortgage, utilities, medical bills, and Tyler's college expenses, they've been collecting donations from family members and their church community. I opened the folder and spread out several bank statements on the table right next to the serving platter of mashed potatoes. Here's a deposit from March for $1,500 with the notation, "Emergency Medical Fund from Patricia and Gerald." Here's another from June for $800 marked "Car Repair Emergency from Church of Grace Donations." And my personal favorite, this one from August for $1,200 labeled "Help for Struggling Daughter Emergency Fund from Extended Family." Aunt Patricia made a sound like all the air was being squeezed from her lungs. "We gave that money to help you, Jacquelyn. Your parents said you were having a medical emergency and couldn't afford treatment." "What medical emergency?" I asked calmly. "I haven't been to a doctor for anything more serious than an annual checkup in 3 years, but I can tell you where that money went." I pulled out another document. Credit card statements showing purchases at luxury resorts, expensive restaurants, and a brand new RV that cost $38,000. My mother stood up so quickly her chair fell backward and crashed to the floor. "You had no right to investigate our private finances. That's illegal." "Actually, investigating fraud is completely legal," I replied, "especially when you're the victim of that fraud. And collecting money under false pretenses is a felony in Illinois." Tyler, who had been silent up until this point, suddenly spoke up. "Wait a minute. You said you paid my college tuition, but Mom and Dad told me you refused to help, that you said college was my own responsibility." The room went even quieter than before, if that was possible. I turned to my brother, seeing confusion and hurt written across his face. "Tyler, I've been paying your full tuition, room, board, and expenses for 2 years now. $57,000 total so far." My brother stood up from his chair, his face flushing red with either anger or embarrassment. That's impossible. Mom showed me bank statements proving they were draining their retirement account to pay for my school. I pulled out yet another document from my folder. Here's my bank statement showing automatic monthly transfers to Northwestern University's billing department. $6,000 every month, like clockwork. I slid the paper across the table to him. Your parents have been lying to you, Tyler. They told me you understood that I was covering your expenses and that you were grateful but didn't want to make a big deal about it. They told you that I refused to help and that they were sacrificing everything for your education. Tyler grabbed the bank statement and stared at it for a long moment. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes. I wrote you a letter last year, a really angry letter telling you how disappointed I was that you wouldn't help your own brother. Mom said she mailed it for me. I never received any letter, I said softly. My father, Robert, who had been silent through this entire exchange, finally found his voice. This is a misunderstanding. We can explain everything. We were just trying to teach you both responsibility and independence. We thought it would be better if what? Uncle Gerald interrupted, his voice rising with anger. If you stole money from your own daughter and then lied to the entire family about it, if you made us all think Jacquelyn was some kind of deadbeat while she was actually supporting your whole lifestyle. We never asked her for money, my mother protested weakly. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You never asked directly, that's true. Instead, you manufactured emergencies. Fake medical crises, car troubles that didn't exist home, repairs that were never needed. And every time I wired money immediately because I thought my family needed help. I pulled out the final document from my folder, the one I had been saving for last. But here's my favorite part, the RV purchase. You told me Dad needed emergency surgery for a detached retina and that insurance wouldn't cover the specialized procedure. You said it cost $40,000 and that without it, he could lose his vision permanently. My father's face went completely white. I transferred the money the same day, I continued, because what kind of daughter wouldn't help her father save his eyesight right? Except 3 days later, you posted pictures on Facebook of your brand new recreational vehicle, tagging the location as our new home away from home for weekend adventures. Aunt Patricia suddenly gasped and put her hand to her chest. Robert, your eyes are fine. You were never going to have surgery. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of my cousin Amanda starting to cry. Tyler was still holding my bank statement when he looked up at our parents with an expression I had never seen before. Pure betrayal mixed with rage and disbelief. His voice shook when he spoke. You told me Jacquelyn said I was on my own for college. You said she told you that paying for my education would make me weak and dependent. My mother reached toward him, but Tyler pulled back. Honey, we were trying to protect both of you from what? Tyler's voice cracked with emotion. From the truth. Do you have any idea what it's been like thinking my own sister didn't care enough to help me? Do you know how many nights I've laid awake feeling guilty about the money you were spending on my education, thinking you were draining your life savings for me? I felt my heart breaking watching my brother's pain unfold. Tyler, I never knew you were struggling with that guilt. If I had known, I would have told you the truth years ago. But that's just it, Tyler said, turning back to our parents. You made sure we couldn't communicate honestly with each other. You told Jacquelyn I was grateful but didn't want to make a big deal about her help. You told me she refused to contribute and thought I should figure it out myself. You kept us from talking to each other about the most important stuff. Uncle Gerald set his wine glass down hard, causing red wine to slosh onto the white tablecloth. How much money are we talking about, total, Jacquelyn? I had been dreading this question, but I also knew it needed to be asked. From my accounts alone, approximately $320,000 over 4 years. That includes the house down payment, monthly mortgage payments, Tyler's college expenses, medical bills, car repairs, home maintenance, vacation funding, and dozens of smaller emergency requests. Aunt Patricia made a strangled sound. $300,000. How is that even possible? I make good money. I said simply, and I believed I was helping my family during difficult times. Every request came with a crisis story and a promise that it was temporary, that they would pay me back once things stabilized. My cousin Amanda wiped tears from her cheeks. But if you were giving them so much money, why were they asking the rest of us for help too? This was the question I had been hoping someone would ask. That's where it gets really interesting, I said, pulling out a different folder I had kept in my purse. My private investigator discovered that my parents have been running donation requests throughout our extended family and their church community for the past 3 years. I spread out photocopied deposit slips across the table. Here's a timeline. In January, they told Aunt Patricia and Uncle Gerald that I was having kidney problems and needed help with medical costs. They collected $1,500. In February, they told their church that Tyler was struggling with depression and needed specialized counseling they couldn't afford. The church raised $2,300. Uncle Gerald stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. We gave them money for your medical treatment, Jacquelyn. Patricia cashed in part of her retirement fund because we thought you were facing kidney failure. In March, I continued. They told our cousins in Milwaukee that I had lost my job and needed help with basic living expenses while I searched for new employment. They collected $800. In April, they told their poker group that Tyler needed emergency dental work after a sports injury. Another $600. Aunt Patricia's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor, red wine spreading across the white tile like blood. She didn't even look down at the mess. We mortgaged our house, she whispered. When they told us you needed surgery in August, we took out a second mortgage to help with the medical expenses. The room went silent except for the sound of my mother sobbing. I felt sick to my stomach. You mortgaged your house? $47,000. Uncle Gerald said, his voice hollow. They said you needed specialized cancer treatment that wasn't covered by insurance. They said it was life or death, and that they were already bankrupting themselves, trying to save you. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. When I opened them, I looked directly at my father. In August, you told me you needed $40,000 for emergency foundation repair because the house was in danger of structural collapse. You said it had to be done immediately or the whole house could become uninhabitable. My father couldn't meet my eyes. I transferred the money the next day, I said, because I couldn't bear the thought of my family losing their home. But there was no foundation repair was there, Dad, because a week later, you and Mom left for that month-long European vacation you posted about on social media, the one where you stayed in 5-star hotels and ate at Michelin-starred restaurants. Tyler suddenly stood up and walked over to the window, staring out at the backyard where we used to play as children. His shoulders were shaking. How many people did you lie to about me? How many people think I'm some kind of burden or failure because of stories you made up? We never meant for it to get so complicated, my mother said through her tears. It started small. We just needed a little help here and there, and we thought if people believed Jacquelyn was struggling, they would be more willing to contribute. But I wasn't struggling, I said quietly. I was doing well. I was happy to help you. You could have just asked me directly for anything you needed. Would you have given us money for a European vacation? My father asked suddenly, the first honest thing he had said all evening. Would you have paid for a luxury RV if we had just asked for fun money? The question hung in the air like a challenge. I thought about it seriously before answering. No, probably not for pure luxury items, but I would have been happy to budget for family vacations or recreational expenses if we had talked about it openly. The problem isn't that you wanted nice things. The problem is that you lied to everyone, stole money under false pretenses, and destroyed my relationships with my own family in the process. Amanda spoke up from across the table. Jacquelyn, I owe you an apology. We all do. The way we've treated you, the assumptions we made about your character and work ethic, the way we talked about you behind your back, thinking we were being sympathetic. We were actually participating in your emotional abuse without even knowing it. Tyler turned around from the window, his face streaked with tears. I wrote you off as selfish and uncaring. I told my girlfriend you were too self-centered to help your own family. I told my friends at college that my sister was successful, but refused to help with my education because she wanted to teach me a lesson about independence. Tyler, I started to say, but he held up his hand. No, let me finish. I've spent 2 years resenting you. 2 years thinking you had written me off as not worth your investment. 2 years feeling guilty every time Mom and Dad stressed about money, thinking it was my fault for going to an expensive school when my own sister wouldn't help. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. And the whole time you were paying for everything. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed 8 times the sound, echoing through our family's destruction. I looked around the table at the faces of people I loved, seeing the pain and confusion and anger that my parents' lies had created in all of us. There's more, I said quietly, knowing that the worst revelations were still to come. The words, "there's more," seemed to suck all the remaining oxygen out of the room. Everyone stared at me with a mixture of dread and fascination, like drivers passing a car accident who can't look away from the wreckage. I opened the 3rd folder I had brought, the one I had hoped I wouldn't need to use. But after watching my Aunt Patricia and Uncle Gerald's devastation about mortgaging their house, I knew the complete truth had to come out. People needed to understand the full scope of what my parents had done so they could make informed decisions about their own financial recovery. 6 months ago, I started getting suspicious about the frequency of medical emergencies in our family. I began. It seemed like every other month someone needed expensive treatment for something urgent. So I did what any financial advisor would do when patterns don't make sense. I started investigating. I pulled out a medical record that my private investigator had obtained through legitimate channels. Mom, would you like to tell everyone about your heart surgery last spring? The one that required $15,000 for a specialized procedure that insurance supposedly wouldn't cover. My mother's crying intensified, but she didn't answer. I'll tell them then. I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. There was no heart surgery. According to medical records from Chicago General Hospital, Susan Miller was admitted for elective cosmetic surgery, a tummy tuck and breast augmentation to be specific. Aunt Patricia gasped so loudly it sounded like she was choking. Cosmetic surgery? You told us it was life-saving heart surgery. The $15,000 I transferred for her heart surgery actually paid for plastic surgery, I continued. But here's the really spectacular part. Mom also collected donations from your church's emergency fund for the same fake heart surgery. Another $12,000 that was supposed to help with recovery costs and missed work time. Uncle Gerald's face was turning red with anger. You used church donations for a boob job. My father suddenly found his voice again. That's enough, Jacquelyn. You're humiliating your mother in front of the entire family. I'm humiliating her, I asked, turning to stare at him in disbelief. Dad, let's talk about your cancer treatments. The color drained from his face so quickly, I thought he might faint right there at the dinner table. For 8 months, my father has been receiving chemotherapy treatments for prostate cancer, expensive treatments that insurance was supposedly fighting against covering. I've been sending $3,000 a month to help with medical costs, transportation to treatments, special dietary needs, and time off work. I pulled out another document. Except according to his medical records, Robert Miller has never been diagnosed with cancer. He's never received chemotherapy. He's never even been tested for prostate cancer despite being 56 years old and overdue for screening. The silence that followed was different from the previous silences. This wasn't shock or confusion. This was horror. Pure, undiluted horror at the realization that someone would fake cancer for money. Tyler spoke first, his voice barely above a whisper. Dad, you don't have cancer. My father looked around the table at faces that had gone from confused to disgusted. I was having some symptoms. I was worried. The money was for testing and consultations. $24,000 for testing, I asked. Dad, a full cancer screening costs maybe $2,000 with insurance. I sent you $24,000 over 8 months for cancer treatments that never happened. I pulled out credit card statements. Would you like to know where that money actually went? Rivers Casino in Des Plaines, every Tuesday and Friday night for 8 months, sometimes Wednesday afternoons too. The average night you lost between $400 and $1,500 playing poker and blackjack. Amanda made a sound like she was going to be sick. You gambled away cancer treatment money. But it gets worse. I said, feeling like I was performing surgery without anesthesia. Because while I was sending money for Dad's fake cancer treatments, my parents were also collecting donations from everyone else for the same non-existent disease. I spread out more deposit slips. Your church held a special fundraiser for the Miller family's cancer battle. They raised $14,000. Your work colleagues contributed another $6,000 through a company sympathy fund. Our extended family gave everything they could spare. Aunt Patricia suddenly stood up and ran toward the bathroom. We could hear her being violently sick through the closed door. Uncle Gerald went after her, leaving his chair overturned behind him. My cousin Amanda was staring at my parents like they were strangers who had broken into our house and taken seats at our family table. How could you do this? How could you look us in the eyes and ask for money for cancer treatments that weren't happening? My mother's response was so quiet I almost couldn't hear it. We were going to pay everyone back once things got better. With what money? Tyler demanded. You don't have jobs anymore. You've been living off Jacquelyn's income and charity donations for years. This was news to me. You don't have jobs. My father cleared his throat nervously. We took early retirement when your income became stable enough to support us. You took early retirement on my income without telling me. We thought of it as a family business arrangement, my mother said weakly. You were supporting us so we could focus on managing the household and helping with family coordination. I stared at her in amazement. Managing the household, Mom, I pay for a cleaning service to come to your house twice a week. I pay for lawn care and snow removal. I pay for your grocery delivery service. What exactly are you managing? And family coordination. Tyler added, his voice rising with fresh anger. You mean lying to family members and coordinating elaborate fraud schemes? Uncle Gerald returned from the bathroom supporting Aunt Patricia, who looked pale and shaken. Patricia wants to go home, he said quietly. But first, we need to know the total amount, everything. We need to figure out how to recover what we can and whether we need to involve law enforcement. I had known this moment would come, but I wasn't prepared for how devastating it would feel to lay out the complete financial destruction my parents had caused. From my personal accounts, $320,000 over 4 years. From family donations that I can verify, approximately $68,000. From church and community fundraising, another $43,000. I paused to let those numbers sink in. Total verifiable theft, $431,000. Aunt Patricia started crying again. Uncle Gerald put his arm around her and said, We lost our retirement savings, all of it. Between what we gave directly and the mortgage we took out, we're financially ruined. The weight of what my parents had done to these good people hit me like a physical blow. These weren't wealthy relatives who could absorb financial losses. Uncle Gerald worked as a mechanic and Aunt Patricia was a school secretary. They had saved carefully for decades to build a modest retirement, and my parents had destroyed it with lies about fake medical emergencies. Tyler walked over to me and put his hand on my shoulder. Jacquelyn, I'm so sorry. Not just about the money, but about how I treated you, about the things I said and thought about you, about the letter I wrote that you never got, about everything. Looking at my brother's face, seeing the genuine remorse and love there, I felt something crack open in my chest. Despite everything, despite all the pain and deception, we still had a chance to rebuild our relationship on truth instead of lies. But my parents had stolen more than money. They had stolen years of authentic relationship between Tyler and me. They had stolen Uncle Gerald and Aunt Patricia's financial security. They had stolen trust and peace of mind from everyone who cared about our family. And now it was time for them to face the consequences. I looked around the table at my devastated family members and made a decision I had been agonizing over for weeks. Reaching into my purse, I pulled out one final folder, this one much thicker than the others. Before I called the bank tonight, I made another phone call, I said quietly. I called my attorney Jennifer Walsh at Walsh & Associates. She's been working on this case for 2 months. My father's fork clattered onto his plate. What case? The criminal fraud case against Robert and Susan Miller for theft by deception wire fraud and elder abuse. I opened the folder and pulled out official-looking documents. Jennifer filed the initial complaint with the Illinois Attorney General's office 3 weeks ago. My mother started hyperventilating. You can't be serious, we're your parents. And that makes what you did worse, not better, I replied. But more importantly, you committed felony fraud against multiple victims, not just me. Uncle Gerald and Aunt Patricia alone lost their entire retirement savings. That makes this elder abuse, which is a separate federal crime. As if on cue, there was a firm knock at the front door. Through the window, I could see the distinctive outline of a police patrol car in the driveway, its lights casting blue and red shadows across the snow-covered front yard. Jacquelyn, what did you do? My father asked, his voice barely controlled panic. I did what any financial advisor would do when they discover a systematic fraud scheme, I said, standing up from the table. I reported it to the authorities. I walked to the front door and opened it to find Detective Sarah Morrison from the Elmhurst Police Department, along with Officer Michael Rodriguez. Detective Morrison and I had been in contact for several weeks as she built the case against my parents. Good evening, Jacquelyn, Detective Morrison said professionally. We're here to serve the warrants we discussed. I nodded and gestured toward the dining room. They're both here along with several of the victims. Detective Morrison and Officer Rodriguez followed me back to the dining room where my parents sat frozen in their chairs like deer caught in headlights. The rest of the family stared at the police officers with expressions ranging from shock to relief. Robert Miller and Susan Miller. Detective Morrison announced formally, "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud theft by deception and elder abuse. You have the right to remain silent." My mother started sobbing hysterically while my father attempted to maintain some dignity, but his hands were shaking as Officer Rodriguez placed him in handcuffs. The sound of the metal clicking shut seemed to echo through the entire house. "This is Christmas," my mother protested through her tears. "You can't arrest us on Christmas." "Fraud doesn't take holidays, ma'am," Detective Morrison replied matter-of-factly while reading them their rights. As the police led my parents toward the front door, my father turned back to look at me. "How could you do this to your own family, Jacquelyn?" The question hung in the air for a moment before I answered. "I didn't do this to our family, Dad. You did. I'm just making sure there are consequences for what you've done to all of these innocent people who trusted you." After my parents were gone, the house felt eerily quiet, except for the grandfather clock ticking in the corner and the soft sound of Aunt Patricia crying. Detective Morrison remained behind to speak with the other victims about their losses and explain the next steps in the legal process. The district attorney's office will be in contact with all of you within the next few days, Detective Morrison explained to Uncle Gerald and Aunt Patricia. You'll be able to provide statements about your financial losses and participate in the restitution process. "Restitution?" Uncle Gerald asked. "You mean we might get our money back?" Detective Morrison chose her words carefully. The defendant's assets will be seized and liquidated as part of the criminal proceedings. Any recovered funds will be distributed among the victims according to their documented losses. However, I want to be realistic with you. In cases like this, victims typically recover only a portion of their losses. After Detective Morrison left, the 5 of us remaining at the table sat in stunned silence. The Christmas dinner had gone completely cold, but nobody seemed to care about food anymore. Tyler was the first to speak. "Jacquelyn, what happens now? I mean, practically speaking. The house, my college payments, everything." I had been preparing for this question too. The house will probably be seized as part of the criminal asset forfeiture, but I have documentation proving that I've paid over $200,000 toward it. My attorney believes I can recover the property through civil proceedings. "And my college?" Tyler asked nervously. "Your education is secure. I assured him. "I've already established a separate education trust fund that can't be touched by criminal proceedings. You'll graduate debt-free as planned." Uncle Gerald looked up from comforting Aunt Patricia. "What about the money we lost, our retirement? The mortgage we took out to help with your fake cancer treatments?" This was the part I had been most excited to share. "Actually, I have some news about that. Remember how I mentioned establishing a trust fund for Tyler's education? I established one for family fraud recovery, too." I pulled out one more document, this one from my bank. "When my grandmother died 5 years ago, she left me a substantial inheritance that I've been investing conservatively. Between the inheritance principal and investment returns, the trust fund currently holds enough money to make all fraud victims whole, plus provide some additional support for rebuilding." Aunt Patricia looked up through her tears. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm going to cover all of your losses," I said simply. "The retirement savings you donated, the second mortgage you took out, everything. You'll actually be in better financial shape than before this happened." Uncle Gerald stared at me like I had just spoken in a foreign language. "You're going to give us money after everything that happened tonight?" "You're victims of fraud," I replied. "You were manipulated and deceived by people you trusted. The fact that those people were my parents doesn't make you any less deserving of justice and recovery." Amanda spoke up quietly. "Why didn't you tell us about the inheritance before?" "Because I wanted to see how this played out first," I admitted. "I needed to know whether my parents would take responsibility for what they'd done, whether they would show remorse, whether they would try to make things right. Instead, they doubled down on lies and manipulation even when confronted with evidence." Tyler stood up and walked around the table to give me a hug. "I'm so proud of you," he said quietly. "You could have just cut them off financially and walked away. Instead, you made sure everyone else was protected too." As we embraced, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: relief. Not just because the truth was finally out, but because I had my brother back. The real Tyler, not the version my parents had manipulated into resenting me. "There's one more thing," I said, looking around at my family. "I want to help everyone rebuild, but I also want to make sure this never happens again. So I'm proposing that we establish new family traditions based on transparency and direct communication." "What do you mean?" Amanda asked. "I mean no more secrets about money, no more lies about who needs help, and no more allowing anyone to control information between family members. If someone needs financial help, they ask directly. If someone can't help, they say so honestly. If someone is struggling, we talk about it openly instead of creating elaborate stories." Uncle Gerald nodded slowly. "That sounds like a healthier way to handle family relationships." "It also means," I continued, "that we all commit to staying in direct contact with each other instead of relying on my parents to relay information. Tyler and I are going to start having regular brother-sister dinners. I'd like Uncle Gerald and Aunt Patricia to be part of our rebuilt family circle, too." Aunt Patricia managed a small smile through her tears. "We'd like that very much." As we began cleaning up the remnants of our Christmas dinner, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: hope. Not naive hope that ignored the pain we had all endured, but mature hope based on truth and authentic relationships. My parents had tried to destroy our family with lies and manipulation, but they had accidentally created an opportunity for us to build something stronger and more honest than what we'd had before. 6 weeks later, I stood in the lobby of the Elmhurst courthouse, waiting for my attorney, Jennifer Walsh, to finish filing the final paperwork in the civil asset recovery case. The criminal proceedings against my parents had moved faster than anyone expected, largely because they had eventually pled guilty to all charges, rather than face a trial where their fraud would be exposed in even more devastating detail. Jennifer emerged from the clerk's office with a satisfied expression. "It's official," she announced. "The house has been transferred back to your ownership free and clear. Your parents' other assets have been liquidated, and the funds will be distributed to fraud victims within 30 days. "How much were you able to recover?" I asked. "More than we hoped," Jennifer replied, consulting her notes. Between the RV jewelry investment accounts they had hidden and the cash settlement from their plea agreement, we recovered about 60% of the stolen funds. Combined with your trust fund contributions, every victim will receive full restitution, plus additional compensation for emotional distress. It felt surreal to hear those words. For so many months, I had been focused on stopping my parents' fraud and protecting other family members from further harm. The idea that we could actually achieve complete financial recovery had seemed impossible when this all started. "What about my parents?" I asked. "What's their situation now?" Jennifer's expression grew more serious. Robert received 18 months in federal prison plus 3 years probation. Susan received 12 months plus 3 years probation. They'll both be required to participate in financial responsibility counseling and are prohibited from accessing credit or managing finances without supervision during their probation period. And after prison, they'll be released to a supervised living situation. Given their ages and lack of employment history, they'll probably qualify for government assistance programs, but they'll be monitored closely to prevent future fraud schemes. As we walked toward the parking garage, I reflected on how different my life had become in just 6 weeks. The constant stress of wondering when the next financial emergency would arise was gone. The confusion about why my family relationships felt so strained and artificial had been resolved. Most importantly, the guilt I had carried about not being a good enough daughter or sister had been replaced by confidence in my own judgment and values. My phone buzzed with a text message from Tyler. "Coffee after your meeting, I have news about Mom and Dad." I had been dreading this conversation but knew it was necessary. Tyler had visited our parents in jail twice since their arrest, something I had chosen not to do. I wasn't ready to face them yet, and I wasn't sure I ever would be. An hour later, Tyler and I sat across from each other at a quiet coffee shop near Northwestern University, where he was finishing his final semester. The change in our relationship over the past 6 weeks had been remarkable. Without our parents controlling the flow of information between us, we had discovered that we actually liked each other as people, not just as siblings. "How are they doing?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I really wanted to know the answer. Tyler stirred sugar into his coffee thoughtfully. "Physically, they're fine. The jail has medical care and decent food. Emotionally, it's complicated. Are they taking responsibility for what they did?" "Dad is starting to, I think. He told me he realizes now that the gambling became an addiction and that he used lies to fund it. He's been attending counseling sessions and seems genuinely remorseful about the harm he caused to Uncle Gerald and Aunt Patricia." "And Mom?" Tyler sighed. "Mom is still mostly focused on feeling sorry for herself. She keeps talking about how humiliating it is to be in jail, how the other inmates judge her, how unfair it is that she's being punished for trying to help her family. She hasn't really grasped that she wasn't helping anyone except herself." This didn't surprise me. Throughout our childhood, our mother had always been skilled at reframing her selfish choices as sacrifices for the family. The cosmetic surgery paid for with donated heart surgery funds was probably in her mind an investment in her self-esteem that would ultimately benefit everyone around her. "Do they want to see me?" I asked. "Dad does. He asked me to tell you that he understands if you never want to speak to him again, but that he would like the chance to apologize in person someday. Mom keeps insisting that if you would just visit, you would understand her side of things and help convince the judge to reduce her sentence." I almost laughed at the audacity. Even from jail, my mother was still trying to manipulate the situation to her advantage. "I'm not ready to see them yet," I said. "Maybe someday, but not now." "I think that's smart," Tyler agreed. "You need time to heal from everything that happened. They put you through years of emotional abuse, even if you didn't realize it at the time." Tyler's use of the phrase emotional abuse surprised me. It was something I had been thinking about a lot lately, but hadn't said out loud. My parents had systematically isolated me from authentic relationships with family members, made me doubt my own perceptions about money and generosity, and trained me to respond to manufactured crises without question. The pattern was subtle, but unmistakably abusive. Speaking of healing, Tyler said, changing the subject, I wanted to tell you about something I've been working on. He pulled out a folder that looked familiar. I've been documenting all the lies Mom and Dad told me about you over the years, not for legal reasons, but for my own healing. I wanted to understand how completely they had manipulated my perception of you as a person. Tyler opened the folder and showed me several pages of handwritten notes. They told me you were jealous of my academic success and didn't want to support my education because you never went to college yourself. I have a bachelor's degree in finance from DePaul and a master's degree from Northwestern, I said, shaking my head in amazement. They told me you were financially irresponsible and had bad credit, which was why you couldn't help with major expenses. I have an 840 credit score and zero debt, except for my condo mortgage, I replied. They told me you were socially awkward and preferred to avoid family gatherings, which was why you always seemed distant at holidays. I stared at him. Tyler, I've been wanting to have a closer relationship with you for years. Every time I tried to spend one-on-one time with you or have deeper conversations, Mom or Dad would interrupt or redirect the discussion to safer topics. Tyler nodded. I see that now. They were managing our relationship to prevent us from becoming close enough to compare notes about what they were telling each of us. As I listened to Tyler read through his list of lies, I realized the true scope of my parents' manipulation. They hadn't just stolen money. They had stolen authentic family relationships by controlling information and creating false narratives about everyone's character and motivations. There's something else, Tyler said, looking nervous. I want to ask you something, but I don't want you to feel obligated. What is it? After I graduate in May, I'd like to move back to Chicago and look for work here. Not because I need financial support, but because I want to rebuild our relationship as adults. I want to be part of your life in a real way. The request made me unexpectedly emotional. For years, I had watched Tyler growing up and becoming an impressive young man, but I had felt like I was observing him from a distance. The idea of having him as a genuine presence in my daily life, not just someone I saw at managed family gatherings, was wonderful. I'd love that, I said, and actually I have an idea about how to make that work. I pulled out my phone and showed Tyler some photos I had taken the previous week. Remember the house, Mom and Dad's house, that's now legally mine again? Tyler nodded. I've been thinking about what to do with it. It's too big for me and it holds too many complicated memories. But it's also a beautiful house in a great neighborhood, so I had an idea. I scrolled through the photos showing Tyler images of the spacious, finished basement with its own entrance, full bathroom and kitchenette. What if I renovated the basement into a separate apartment? You could live there while you get established in your career, and we could share the main house for family dinners and hanging out, but you'd have complete privacy and independence. Tyler's face lit up. That would be amazing, but are you sure after everything that happened in that house? I think reclaiming it with new memories might be exactly what we both need, I replied. Besides, the house itself isn't evil, it's just a building. The evil was in the lies and manipulation that happened inside it. We can change that by filling it with honesty and authentic family relationship instead. As we made plans for Tyler's post-graduation move and the house renovation, I felt the final piece of my healing falling into place. My parents had tried to destroy our family with deception and fraud, but they had accidentally created an opportunity for Tyler and me to build the kind of sibling relationship we should have had all along. 6 months from now, we would be living in the same house where our family had been torn apart by lies. But this time, we would be building it back up with truth, direct communication, and genuine care for each other's well-being. It felt like the most complete victory I could have imagined. 1 year later, I stood in the kitchen of what had once been my parents' house, preparing Thanksgiving dinner for the family we had rebuilt from the ashes of their deception. Through the window, I could see Tyler in the backyard playing catch with Uncle Gerald's new puppy, while Aunt Patricia and my cousin Amanda set up tables under the maple tree that had turned brilliant orange with autumn leaves. The house itself had been transformed over the past 12 months. Tyler's basement apartment was cozy and modern, decorated with his college memorabilia and the artwork he had started creating as a stress relief hobby. The main floor had been repainted in warmer colors and filled with new furniture that held no memories of manipulation or lies. Most importantly, it had become a gathering place for honest family relationships instead of a stage for elaborate deceptions. My phone rang and I saw Jennifer Walsh's name on the caller ID. She had become not just my attorney, but a friend over the past year, helping me navigate the complex process of rebuilding our family's finances and relationships. "Jacquelyn, I have the final update on your parents' situation," Jennifer said when I answered. "Are you ready for this?" "I think so." Robert was released from federal prison last week and has been placed in a supervised halfway house in Rockford. He's required to work at least 30 hours per week and attend gambling addiction counseling twice weekly. So far, he's been compliant with all requirements. And Mom. Susan was released 3 weeks ago and is living in a women's transitional housing facility in Aurora. She's working part-time at a grocery store and attending financial responsibility counseling. Her probation officer reports that she's been more resistant to the program requirements, but she hasn't violated any terms of her release. I felt a complicated mix of emotions hearing this news. Relief that they were safely housed and supervised, sadness that their choices had led them so far from the family they could have had, and a small amount of hope that they might still learn from their experiences and find a way to live honestly. Have they asked about contact with you or Tyler? Robert has requested permission to write you a letter, but only if you're willing to receive it. Susan has made no contact requests and seems to be focused on her own adjustment to life outside of jail. "I'm not ready for contact yet," I said after thinking for a moment. "Maybe someday, but not now." "That's completely understandable. Take whatever time you need." After ending the call, I reflected on how much had changed in my understanding of family relationships over the past year. The family I had grown up in was built on secrets manipulation and the control of information. The family we had created in its place was built on direct communication, transparency, and respect for each other's autonomy. Tyler came through the back door, bringing the scent of autumn air and the sound of laughter from the backyard. Uncle Gerald wants to know if the turkey will be ready soon. He's getting impatient for his annual tryptophan coma. 20 more minutes, I replied, checking the meat thermometer. "How's everyone doing out there?" "Really good. Aunt Patricia brought photos from their cruise last month. Apparently Uncle Gerald tried to learn to surf in Jamaica and face planted into the sand about 12 times. The cruise had been possible because of the financial recovery from the fraud case, but more importantly because Uncle Gerald and Aunt Patricia were no longer living in fear of unexpected financial emergencies. They had learned to budget for the things they wanted instead of draining their savings for other people's manufactured crises. "Amanda's been telling me about her new job," Tyler continued. "She's really excited about the promotion opportunity. Amanda had used her portion of the recovery funds to go back to school for a nursing degree. She was now working at Chicago General Hospital and talking about specializing in elder care, inspired partly by her experience with financial fraud against older adults. And I have news too," Tyler said, grinning. "I got the job." I dropped the spoon I was holding. The financial analyst position at Morrison Investment Group. They called this morning with the offer. I start in 3 weeks. Tyler had graduated from Northwestern with a degree in economics and had been interviewing at several Chicago financial firms. Morrison Investment Group was his first choice, a mid-sized firm known for ethical business practices and strong employee development programs. "I'm so proud of you," I said, giving him a hug. "Not just about the job, but about how you've handled everything this year. The way you've processed what happened with Mom and Dad, the way you've rebuilt relationships with everyone, the way you've created your own independent life while still being part of our family. It's been really impressive to watch." "I learned from watching you," Tyler replied. "The way you handled the whole situation taught me what it looks like to be strong and ethical under pressure." As we finished preparing dinner together, I thought about the lessons this experience had taught all of us. We had learned that family love doesn't mean accepting abuse or manipulation. We had learned that financial boundaries are necessary, even with people we care about. We had learned that secrets and lies destroy relationships, while truth and direct communication strengthen them. Most importantly, we had learned that it's possible to rebuild family relationships on healthier foundations, even after devastating betrayals. The timer chimed, indicating that our turkey was perfectly cooked. Tyler called everyone in from the backyard, and soon our dining room was filled with the kind of authentic family conversation I had always wished for, but never experienced growing up. Uncle Gerald shared stories from his mechanical work that made everyone laugh until their sides hurt. Aunt Patricia talked about her volunteer work at the Literacy Center, describing the progress her adult students were making with obvious pride and affection. Amanda told us about the patients she was caring for and the difference she felt she was making in their recovery experiences. Tyler talked about his excitement for starting his career and his appreciation for having family support that didn't come with strings attached or hidden agendas. And I shared my own news. I had been promoted to senior partner at Meridian Wealth Management and was being given the opportunity to develop a new division focused on family financial planning and fraud prevention. I want to help other families avoid what happened to us, I explained. There are warning signs of financial manipulation that people can learn to recognize. There are legal protections that families can put in place. There are communication strategies that prevent the kind of information control that Mom and Dad used against us. That sounds like important work, Aunt Patricia said. I think about how many families probably go through similar situations but never find the courage or resources to address them, or never realize what's happening until it's too late, Uncle Gerald added. We trusted your parents completely. If you hadn't been strong enough to investigate and take action, we might have lost everything we had worked for our entire lives. As the afternoon progressed and our conversation moved from the dining room to the living room, I felt grateful for the painful journey that had brought us to this point. Not grateful for the betrayal and fraud, but grateful for the opportunity it had created to build authentic relationships based on truth and mutual respect. My parents had tried to create a family structure where they controlled all information and resources while everyone else remained dependent and uninformed. What they had accidentally created instead was a family of people who valued honesty, supported each other's independence, and communicated directly about both problems and joys. As the sun began to set and our family gathering started to wind down, I realized that this was the life lesson I wanted other people to understand. Toxic family dynamics can only survive in environments of secrecy and information control. When truth is brought into the light and honest communication is established, healthy relationships become possible even after devastating betrayals. The journey from betrayal to recovery isn't easy or quick, but it's possible when people are willing to prioritize truth over comfort and authentic relationship over convenient lies. As I said goodbye to Uncle Gerald and Aunt Patricia and helped Amanda carry leftover food to her car, I felt the deep satisfaction of knowing that we had not only survived our family crisis, but had emerged stronger and more connected than we had ever been before. Tyler and I cleaned up the kitchen together, talking about his upcoming job and making plans for Christmas dinner, which would be the first holiday celebration in our rebuilt home. As we worked, I reflected on how different this felt from the Christmas dinner exactly 1 year ago when everything had fallen apart. This time there were no secrets, no lies, no hidden agendas, and no manufactured crises. Just honest conversation, genuine affection, and the peace that comes from relationships built on truth instead of manipulation. Before I finish this story, I want to ask you something that's been on my mind a lot lately. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where family members or close friends were asking for financial help, but something about their requests didn't feel quite right? Maybe the stories kept changing, or the emergencies seemed to happen too frequently, or you found out later that they had told different people different versions of the same situation. If so, you're not alone and you're not wrong to trust your instincts when something feels off. Financial manipulation within families is more common than most people realize, and it can be devastating, not just financially, but emotionally and relationally as well. The most important thing I learned from this experience is that asking questions, setting boundaries, and even investigating suspicious situations doesn't make you a bad family member. It makes you a responsible adult who is protecting not just yourself, but potentially other family members who might also be victims. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help it reach other people who might be dealing with similar situations. Subscribe to hear more stories about family dynamics, financial boundaries, and the courage it takes to choose truth over comfort. Share this video with anyone you know who might benefit from understanding how family financial manipulation works and how to address it. And most importantly, leave a comment below telling me about your own experiences with family financial boundaries. Have you ever had to choose between family harmony and financial protection? How did you handle requests for help that didn't feel legitimate? What advice would you give to someone who suspects they're being manipulated by family members? Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of this community where we can share difficult experiences and learn from each other's courage. I hope that whatever challenges you're facing in your own family relationships, you'll remember that choosing truth and authentic communication is always worth the temporary discomfort it might cause. Take care of yourselves, trust your instincts, and never be afraid to ask for help when you need it.